What is the chilling secret of the Brandford apartment building?
Who is the mysterious Roman Castevet?
And what about all of them witches?
These and other questions will be answered in this week's
It's Frenzy Frights.
Welcome to Frenzy Frights, a horror movie review show. My name is Gerry.
And I'm Chris.
And we are your hosts.
On Frenzy Frights, we are going to talk about horror movies, monster movies, creature features, and spook shows of all sorts. We love these movies, even if sometimes they fall short. We will share our love for these films, but also point out issues in a genre-appropriate way.
Chris, what movie were we talking about today?
Thanks, Prof. This is a good one. We're going to talk about Rosemary's Baby. This was directed by Roman Polanski. The screenplay was done by Roman Polanski, and it was based on Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin. This was produced by William Castle. For our cast, we have Mia Farrow as Rosemary Woodhouse, John Cassavetes as Guy Woodhouse, Ruth Gordon as Minnie Castevet, Sidney Blackmer as Roman Castevet, Morris Evans as Hutch, Ralph Bellamy as Dr. Abraham Saperstein, Elisha Cook as Mr. Nicholas, Charles Grodin played Dr. Hill, and we had Tony Curtis as the voice of Dr. Baumgart. He was uncredited, and we may or may not have seen Sharon Tate in this as a party guest, and she was uncredited. Prof, the release date on this was June 12th, 1968. It had a running time of 137 minutes. Can you please give us a brief synopsis of the movie? And then we will follow up with our own thoughts.
You betcha. Our story starts in 1965 in the little town called the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Husband and wife, Rosemary and Guy Woodhouse, are looking for apartments. So this is 1965, so it's too early for John Lennon to be in the building or for there to be murders in the building. And this isn't the Dakota or the Arconia. Today, we call this building the Brandford. They look at an apartment. Amazing that an actor with sparse credits can afford apartments like this. I guess rent control was working pretty good. The apartments on their floor used to be bigger, but they were broken up into smaller apartments. Guy and Rosemary are trying for children, and they're looking for some more space. The last tenant of this apartment died, and the furniture is still in there. But a big secretary chest has been moved in front of a closet door. Rental agent Elijah Cook gets Guy to help him move it. Inside the closet, there's just a vacuum cleaner and towels and a sneaky door to the next apartment left over from the renovation. Why was the chest in the way? Weird. Rosemary and Guy move in and renovate the place. The two have dinner at the apartment of an old friend, Hutch. He's not Dr. Zaius, just sounds like him. He tells them about the stories behind the Black Brandford. The Trench sisters were caught cannibalizing little girls in the building. Also, Adrian Marcato, a famous witch, said he was able to raise the devil and was killed either inside or just outside the building by angry villagers. Greenwich villagers? With torch songs and pitch pipes? Anyway. Also, in 1959, a dead infant was found in the basement. But the apartment has good lights, so don't worry about the spooky stuff. Rosemary and Guy set up the apartment and notice that they can hear the neighbors through the walls. One day, Rosemary meets a young woman, Terry, in the laundry room. Terry lives in the next apartment to them. She was taken in by an elderly couple, the Castevets, Roman and Minnie, who saved her from a life on the street. Also, look at this cool necklace they gave me with this weird-smelling herb inside, tannis root. That night, Rosemary hears weird chanting coming from the Castevets' place. That night, Guy and Rosemary are outside the apartment building, and there are cops outside, too. Terry is laying on the sidewalk in a pool of blood, dead. She jumped from her window. The Castevets arrive and are deeply saddened and disturbed by this. Guy and Rosemary introduce themselves to them. They're invited over to the Castevets for dinner, and we hear that Guy just lost a part to an actor named Donald Baumgart. Roman and Guy talk in private, and afterwards Guy looks sketchy. They give Rosemary the same necklace that Terry had. Isn't that sweet? But the smell of tannis root is not that sweet. That guy, Donald Baumgart, who beat out Guy for that part, suddenly goes blind. So Guy gets the part and is off to success. He decides, let's start making a baby. So on the optimal ovulation night, they have a romantic dinner and wine. The doorbell rings. It's Minnie from next door with 2 chocolate mousses. She calls it chocolate mouses. She's a card. Rosemary finds a strange, chalky taste in the dessert, and when Guy isn't looking, she ditches most of it. But in a bit, she starts feeling woozy and faints. Fainted, Rosemary starts having crazy dreams. There are boats and sounds, and also people she has met, including Guy, nude in some kind of ceremony with chanting and stuff. People are saying she can see she's awake, and in the dream, Minnie says no, if she eats the mouse, she's asleep. They tie her down, and then comes a bestial creature that mounts her and has sex with her, I guess. The next morning, she and Guy wake up, and she's all scratched up. Guy says, sorry, I had a rough nail that must have scraped you. Also sorry that I had make baby sex with you when you were passed out. But hey, it's 1965 and stuff happens. Rosemary goes to Dr. Hill, who may or may not be Charles Grodin, to get a pregnancy test. Yes, she's pregnant, and the baby is due June 1966. 666 for those keeping score at home. Minnie sends Rosemary to get her doctor, Dr. Abe Saperstein, played by Ralph Bellamy. Saperstein says Minnie will give Rosemary a daily drink with herbs and stuff. Cool. Rosemary gets a pixie haircut and no one likes it. She also starts having pain in her stomach, but Saperstein says, that's no problem. It'll go away in a few days. But Rosemary looks terrible. She's losing weight and is pale, looking like a piece of chalk. Roman comes over to the apartment and meets Hutch, and Rosemary notices he has a pierced ear. Then Guy comes home, and when Hutch leaves, he's missing a glove. That's weird. Hutch calls with an urgent message the next day, let's meet for lunch tomorrow. She tells Guy about the meeting. Then Guy goes out quickly for ice cream or a ritual or to fess out Rosemary or something. And Rosemary goes to meet Dutch the next day, but he doesn't show. She finds out that he's in a coma at St. Vincent's. Oh, no. Now, pregnancy is hard, especially when you're having the devil's baby, but she thought she was having John Cassavetes' baby, so you can understand the confusion. Rosemary pushes Guy into having a party with her old friends to announce the pregnancy. At the party, she cries to all her friends about the pain and tells them what's going on with all the pregnancy stuff. And it all sounds crazy to the girls. They convince her to go back to Dr. Hill. Also, she decides she's not going to drink Minnie's drink anymore. When Guy hears about all this, he gets angry and they fight. But suddenly the pain stops. Maybe she won't need Dr. Hill after all. Cool. Oh, wow, Rosemary feels the baby move. Guy's happy, but won't touch her stomach to feel it. The couple begin to prepare for the titular baby. Bad news, Hutch died. Rosemary goes to the cemetery for the burial and meets a friend of Hutch. She says that he had woken up from his coma to give Rosemary a book, and then she hands over the book. And she says that his last words were, "The name is an anagram." She gets home and looks at the book. Only witches in the building. Oh, no, that's not right. The title is All of Them Witches. Is the book title an anagram? She breaks out the Scrabble set and tries to make something that makes sense. Nothing works. The book is about famous witches in history. One chapter is on Adrienne Marcado, and there's a picture of the Marcado family and one name, Stephen, underlined. She anagrams the name Stephen Marcado, and it works out to Roman Castevet. Oh my God, Roman's the son of a witch that had been killed in the lobby of this building. Dang. Rosemary starts to do her own research and finds that the weird stuff she's been hearing through the walls is witchery. Are Roman and Minnie witches? She tells Guy all this. He freaks out, takes the book from her, and gets rid of it. She says she doesn't want to raise a baby next door to witches. She visits Saperstein and tells him all about it. Now, he doesn't argue with her, but it turns out Roman is dying. He and Minnie are about to leave the city to go on a world trip. Rosemary starts to get suspicious about the Castevets and even about Guy. She buys a bunch of books on witchcraft. She finds that covens can make people blind. just like what happened to Donald Baumgart, that lost the part that made Guy successful. Rosemary calls Baumgart and finds that before he went blind, Guy went to see him. Also, they swapped ties. So Guy was able to get a personal belonging from Donald for the witch spell. Also, Hutch lost the glove when he visited. Did Guy steal that too, killing Hutch? And they use baby flesh and blood for spells. Is that what they want their baby for? Oh no, this is a nightmare. Rosemary packs her bag and goes to Dr. Saperstein. She has to wait. She threw away the Tanis root necklace. The receptionist mentioned that she smells better than she used to and that Dr. Saperstein has the same smell. Rosemary realizes that Dr. Saperstein is in the cult too. She leaves and goes to Dr. Hill and explains the situation about the witches and stuff. He says, "Oh, this sounds very serious. I'll take care of it," but instead calls Saperstein, who brings Guy to come and get his crazy wife. But Rosemary escapes from them and locks herself in the apartment. But somehow they all get in, and Saperstein gives her a sedative, but then she goes into labor. The title character is finally coming. When Rosemary wakes up, they tell her everything's okay, but then when she wakes up again later, they say the baby died. It was a boy. Rosemary doesn't believe the baby died. She thinks the witches took it for their ceremonies. But then Rosemary can hear a baby crying through the wall. She follows the sound through the secret door in the closet and goes into Roman and Minnie's apartment. Roman and Minnie are not on a world tour. They're having what looks like a cocktail party with a giant black draped crib in the corner. Her baby. The crowd quiets as she approaches. The mother, the mother. There's some discussion, and Roman encourages her to take the baby. She looks at the child. "What have you done to it? What have you done to its eyes?" Roman says, "He has his father's eyes." Also, they mention he's got his hands and feet, but the eyes have it. Rosemary has given birth to the son of Satan. Hail Adrian, hail Satan, the year is one. Rosemary picks up her child and embraces it as the coven watches the mother of the child care for their new master. The end. Wow. Chris, what did you think about Rosemary's Baby?
Prof, I think it's a classic even by today's standards, but somewhat underrated. I don't know if it gets a lot of love and mention. Yeah. We're going to talk about our thoughts, but right now, as per usual, I'll get some trivia out of the way. Francois Truffaut and it was said that Alfred Hitchcock were both offered the chance to direct this film, but each declined. The powers that be admired Polanski's European films, and they hoped that they could convince him to make his American debut with Rosemary's Baby. He knew that Polanski was a ski buff, and he was anxious to make a film with sport as his basis, so he sent him the script for Downhill Racer, another movie, but he also sent Rosemary's Baby. Polanski read the latter, and he read it nonstop through the night, and he called the producer the next day and said, yes, this is the more interesting project, and he'd like to write it as well. So after some negotiations, Paramount Pictures agreed to hire Polanski to do the project with a tentative budget of $1.9 million, $150,000 of which would go to Polanski. Polanski completed the 272-page screenplay for the film in approximately 3 weeks, and he closely modeled it after the original 1967 novel by Ira Levin. And he incorporated large sections of the novel's dialogue and details, much of it really being lifted from the source's text. Now, for a cast, it began with the casting process in the summer of 1967 in L.A. Roman Polanski originally envisioned Rosemary as a robust, full figure, girl next door, and he thought about Tuesday Weld or his own fiancée Sharon Tate to play the role. Jane Fonda, Patty Duke, and Goldie Hawn were also reportedly considered for the role as well. Since the book hadn't yet reached, quote, blockbuster status, Evans wasn't sure the title alone would guarantee an audience for the film, and he believed a bigger name was needed for the lead. But Mia Farrow, with a supporting role in a film called Guns for Batiste and a yet-to-release movie called The Dandy and Aspic, as her only feature credits, she didn't really have a proven track record. But she was in a soap opera at the time called Peyton Place. Maybe some people have heard of it. And she had a role on the show called Allison Mackenzie. And she also, right around the time, had Marriage to Frank Sinatra. So this sort of kind of gave her a little bit of popularity. Now, despite her appearance, Pulaski agreed to cast her, despite her not quite being what he was looking for. But the acceptance with her doing this really incensed her husband at the time, Frank Sinatra, who demanded she forgo her acting career when they wed. Ouch. Robert Redford was the first choice to cast Guy Woodhouse, but he turned it down. Jack Nicholson was briefly considered before Polanski suggested John Cassavetes, who he met in London. In casting the film's secondary actors, Polanski just drew sketches of what he imagined the characters would look like, which were then used by Paramount casting directors to match the potential actors. In the roles of Roman and Minnie Castevet, Polanski cast veteran stage and film actors Sidney Blackmer and Ruth Gordon. Veteran character actor Ralph Bellamy was cast as Dr. Saperstein, and many years later, Bellamy and Blackmer also appeared in one movie together called This Man Is Mine, which was a pre-code film. When Rosemary calls Dr. Baumgart, the actor who goes blind and replaced by Guy, the voice heard on the phone is Tony Curtis. Now, Farrow, who had not been told who would be reading Baumgart's line, recognized the voice of Tony Curtis, but couldn't place it. So the slight confusion that she displays throughout the call is exactly what Polanski hoped would be captured, but not revealing Curtis's identity in advance. There is something we're going to talk about in the little coming minutes. There's a Time magazine feature with the cover story Is God Dead? That actually was a magazine, and it was used on the April 8th, 1966 cover story, and we'll get a little bit more detail on that a little later. The principal photography for this movie began on August 21st, 1967 in New York City. The Dakota's exteriors served as the location for fictional Bramford. Levin modeled it on the buildings like the Dakota. In the novel, Hutch even urges Rosemary and Guy to move into, quote, the Dakota ahead of the Bramford. When Mia Farrow was reluctant to film a scene that depicted a dazed and confused, preoccupied Rosemary just wandering in the middle of Fifth Avenue into oncoming traffic, Polanski pointed to her pregnancy padding and reassured her, quote, no one's going to hit a pregnant woman. The scene was successfully shot with Mia Farrow walking literally into real traffic and Polanski following her, operating a handheld camera since he was the only one willing to do so. By September of 1967, the shoot had relocated to Paramount Studios in Hollywood, where the interior shots of the Bramford apartments had been constructed on sound stages. Some additional location shooting took place in the Playa del Rey in October of 1967. Mia Farrow recalled that the dream sequence, in which her character is attending a dinner party on a yacht, was filmed on a vessel near Santa Catalina Island. Now, though Paramount had initially agreed to spend about $1.9 million to make the film, the shoot was overextended to Roman Polanski's meticulous attention to detail, which resulted in his completing up to 50 takes of single shots. The shoot suffered significant scheduling problems as a result and ultimately went $400,000 over budget. In November of 1967, it was reported that the shoot was over 3 weeks behind schedule. The shoot was further disrupted when, midway through filming, Mia Farrow's husband, Frank Sinatra, served her divorce papers via a corporate lawyer in front of the entire cast and crew. Yikes. In an effort to salvage her relationship, Farrow asked Evans to release her from the contract, but he persuaded her to remain on the project after showing her an hour-long rough cut and assuring her that she would receive an Academy Award nomination for her performance. Filming was completed on December 20th, 1967, and unfortunately, Mia was not nominated. A little more trivia, the lullaby played over to the intro of the song is entitled Sleep Safe and Warm. It was composed by Christoph Komeda, and it was sung by Mia Farrow. There's a tenant practicing Fleur Elise in the background, and it's frequently used as background music throughout the movie, with the skill improving throughout the film to demonstrate the progression of time. Despite being over budget, the film was a major box office hit for Paramount Pictures. It grossed a total of $33,397,000 worldwide against a $3.2 million budget. There's a scene where Mia Farrow is eating some meat. She actually ate raw liver for a scene, despite the fact that she was a vegetarian at the time. Some tension behind the set. Roman Polanski said working with John Cassavetes was not, quote, his best experience. John was not very comfortable with the role. And according to Mia Farrow, Cassavetes resented Polanski's highly structured method of shooting scenes, saying he preferred to improvise and he was more of a freewheeling approach. Eventually, tensions grew between the two and of their conflicting approaches. And in an interview for the Criterion Collection for this film, Polanski said Cassavetes was a, quote, pain in the ass. A little bit further trivia. Tanis Root is mentioned in the movie. It doesn't exist. Ira Levin made it up for the story. Like the letters of transit from Casablanca, it became an important plot element, but it was entirely fictional. There's a very uncomfortable rape scene in this, and for the scene, John Cassavetes was naked. But among the coven, Mia Farrow, Patsy Kelly, and Ruth Gordon were not nude, the latter two being clad in bodysuits. For the majority of the scene, a stand-in by the name of Linda Brewerton was used to substitute for Farrow. Quote, I appeared in every single scene of the film except when, during the devil scene, a body double was used in my place, Farrow wrote. Farrow continues, but I didn't entirely miss out on the scene. One day I found myself, me from convent school, who prayed with outstretched arms and preyed on light, tied to four corners of a bed, ringed by the elderly, chanting witches, while a perfect stranger with bad skin and vertical pupils was grinding away on top of me. I didn't dare think. After finishing that scene, the actor climbed off of me and said politely, in all seriousness, Miss Farrow, I just want to say it's a real pleasure to have worked with you. At the end of the opening credits, and later the spot where Terry dies, an overhead shot of the south entrance of the Dakota Apartments is shown. And as Prof alluded to, it's the Arch Gateway where John Lennon was shot in 1980. Curiously, shortly before the film release, Mia Farrow and her sister Prudence had been a part of the group that accompanied the Beatles to India in 1968 to take part in the Transcendental Meditation course hosted by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. It was during this trip that John Lennon wrote the song Dear Prudence, as inspired by Mia's younger sister. There's a scene in the film where Mia Farrow mouths the words 4377 with reference to the phone, and written out that can be interpreted as spelled out the word hell. The movie was also spoofed in Mad Magazine on issue 124. It was cover dated January 1969 in a story entitled Rosemary's Boo Boo. And at the time of this recording, this movie is streaming on Paramount Plus. Prof, let's pick it apart. I'm dying to hear what your thoughts were on this one. What is your take? How much do you like this movie? And what were some of the things you really appreciated? Were some of the acting performances, I'm sure, some of the New York locales? Let's get into it.
Yeah, I definitely. First of all, I wanted to talk about John Cassavetes a little bit. He was a great director, actor, but not in these big budgety things. He was kind of a very indie creator. He did, things like Murder of a Chinese Bookie, a lot of stuff like that, and stuff that most people wouldn't really watch, but were very kind of method acting. He's a really great actor, and there were a couple of scenes that really worked here for me. When he hears Donald Bumgarner went blind, right? So the night before they had been over the Cassavetes, and Roman said, "Oh, imagine what happened, kind of that we didn't see." Roman says, "Oh, we're witches, and we can help you with your career if you just basically let Rosemary have the baby of the devil. So if you can help us with that, we'll make you a star. So we'll help you get that part that you lost." And when he hears that Donald Bumgarner has gone blind, he realizes that Roman isn't just some crank. He's going to be able to deliver what he says, but now Guy has to give up Rosemary. And just the conflict in his face is really strong. And when he hears later that Rosemary is pregnant, he doesn't want to touch her. He freaks out. He kind of runs off into the kitchen and comes right back. He's definitely wound up. And, he kind of touches her just to make her feel okay, but he's really weirded out by it. And then later, when Rosemary feels the baby move, Guy will not put his hand on her stomach. And I think these things that the audience, on a second viewing will understand what's going on, but on a first viewing is like just totally clueless. I think it's really strong acting. I think this is overall one of the really great horror movies. It's really spooky, even though it doesn't have an eerie vibe to it. We talked about was it last week, a couple of weeks ago, Phantasm, which is a movie that is has a cool vibe, but isn't, maybe the best put together movie from a technical standpoint. This movie does not have a cool vibe like that, not an eerie vibe, but it's different. It's set in New York City, which doesn't, isn't the typical locale for a horror movie. But it's so well put together, so well acted, just meticulous. Every piece, you as a viewer are just led through this movie, through all of these plot points, complicated plot points, so carefully. Very cool. I think this is a great movie. But a couple of things. Why would someone anagram their name? I always have this problem. Stephen Mercado, if you were Stephen Mercado and wanted to go into hiding, why would you? Yeah, I always think if I was going to go into hiding, would I anagram my name? Like, why would you do that? I would just call myself John Smith. But in this case, it gives her something to figure out with the Scrabble set. Something interesting, they when I was a kid, I saw this movie, and I also saw the Mummy movies, Mummy's Hand, all that stuff. And for some reason, I always got Tanis root and Tana leaves confused. I don't know. And the kind of, as we kind of are reviewing this movie, one kind of topic I don't know if you have any thoughts about, but issues with problematic artists, and I'm speaking about Roman Polanski here. Roman Polanski is no longer allowed into the United States and hasn't been since the 70s, since he was convicted in absentia for rape of a 13-year-old girl. And movies like this, movies like Chinatown, movies that I love that are by guys that have done horrific things and are still out there, have gotten away with it, even though he can't come back to the U.S. He's a free man in Switzerland or Poland or wherever he went to. It's really conflicting. I get really conflicted about seeing this great movie and wanting to heap praise on it, but knowing that I'm heaping praise on a very problematic guy. And I know people have said, oh, think about all the classical artists that were murderers or did horrible things, and we still appreciate their work. And I understand that, but I don't know. There's something conflicting about having, praising a movie by Roman Polanski. But there you have it. Chris, what are some of your thoughts on Rosemary's Baby?
Prof, right on the onset, we get the opening credits, and it's this nice pink cursive imposed over New York City scenes. And then I see the words a William Castle production, and I just had to give pause because I had totally forgotten of Castle's involvement with this movie. And the first thing that I think of when I think of William Castle is a talented director with the gimmicks, if you will. And I just kind of had to give pause that here he is doing something straightforward, and I think there was a conflict with him producing. He wanted to direct, but they didn't want him to direct, but that's a whole other topic. But just to see William Castle's name attached gave me a smile because I like William Castle. Definitely. Prof, I'm going to get into it a little more deeper, but I was just really impressed. When I see a movie, I look for the names. Typically when I watch a movie, an older movie, a Svengoolie movie, I'm looking at the names and just to see where if I recognize them. There was just a whole slew of names here that I said, oh, I forgot this person was here. I forgot that person was here. So I thought, oh, this told me I'm really overdue for a rewatch of this film. There was some conflict with seeing Vidal Sassoon's name getting plugged also in the opening credits as well. And there's a mention of Vidal Sassoon giving me the haircut, and it's not warmly received. And I wonder what Sassoon thought, because I'd have to think this really kind of did a boost for his business, but some people were perhaps taken aback by this. I couldn't help but compare Mia Farrow a little bit to the look and vibe of Twiggy, if you will, looking at photographs. This was slightly before my time of seeing Twiggy, the waif look, and wondering how popular it was, and then seeing Mia Farrow as well. This was sort of in the public zeitgeist at the time. I'm just wondering how much of an influence one was versus another with respect to it. Prof, I've got some other things in my notes. One thing I had, just really liking it from the way it was shot and having the conflicted feelings as you aforementioned as well. But I think we're going to also, as we do a little bit deeper dive in this one, we're also going to have a little bit more of some of the questions as to the character's actions, if you will. And one of the things that also stood out to me was Hutch's friend. Now, both of our central characters, Cassavetes and Farrow, are really, this is a close friend. Now, who is Hutch's friend all of a sudden? There is no previous mention. And Hutch's death was off screen. I thought that was a little bit of suspicious, but I think what really works for this movie is just the increasing tension and the slow burn that we get in this. We have gradual paranoia when everything seems warm and cheery at first, but then there's the suspicious death off of the building. Was it an accident? Was it a suicide? People kind of being a little more overly friendly, and Cassavetes buying it, and Farrow being a little more cautious. The paranoia slowly ramps up. The horror slowly gets burned. And you just feel for Farrow's character here, because Rosemary is a first-time pregnancy. Both of the couple, they want to have kids. They're planning on when they're conceiving down to the thing. And then when her getting the joyous news and wanting to share it, now all of a sudden everybody wants to kind of chime in and offer their own suggestions. Oh, don't see this doctor, see this doctor. Don't do this and take these vitamins. Take these fresher potions, if you will, for lack of a better word. And you could just see the conflict that and the agony that Rosemary is going through. And I think Farrow does a great job just selling this emotional beats throughout the movie. And for her to be put through the ringer, seeing her complexion fade, seeing her look more just emaciated with barely eating and everything like this, just the mental torture, the physical things that she's going through is just a gut wrench. Fantastic movie. Prof, I want to take a step back because I think each of us have some favorite moments of this. So before we get too far ahead, what were some of your favorite moments of the movie?
Well, I have some favorite moments, and I also have a couple of little tidbits, being from, having lived in Manhattan myself. They mentioned going to see The Fantastics. So that was a play. It was a downtown New York City staple for decades at the Sullivan Street Theater. I've seen it a couple of times. I mean, it was just one of those things that you would do sometimes in the city. And interestingly enough, there are also plans for a rape in that story. There's a scene when Ruth Gordon is calling Dr. Saperstein and wants to get, Mia Farrow's character to be a patient of his. And she's kind of hidden by the wall. And the way the camera is moving is very kind of strange. It's moving a little bit. And I read where in the theaters, when this movie would play in the theater, that she's partially blocked. You can only see like maybe her legs and a little bit of her, that people actually would kind of bend over to look around the corner in the movie theater to see if they could see what she was up to. So I think that was a really strong scene, even though really nothing happened. Another thing that I like that I remember from, city life is sirens at night when you're asleep, just being able to be soothed to sleep by the sounds of the sirens. I love it. And also their phones, they're plugging in the house phones, moving the phone across, to another room, bringing the cable with them to carry the phone in. It's, very, very 1966. Phone booths, things like that. And also, there's a lot of throwaway things that I think are really good. So they're having a New Year's party, and Roman says, and you don't really even know what's going on at this point. Roman says, to 1966, the year one. That comes up again later. But knowing that this is the birth of Satan's child, the year one. A line that Guy says, it's just a throwaway. I got that shirt that was in the New Yorker. Just remembering the days where people would like see shirts and clothes in magazines and get obsessed by them. You mentioned Is God Dead? Another thing from that era, and also Scrabble playing a big part in this. All of these very suburban, normal things. Shirts in the New Yorkers, Time magazine, Scrabble, normal suburban, urban kind of things, but they take on a menacing aspect. I also like the scene at the baby party as Rosemary enters the party, people slowly getting quiet around her as they realize what's going on. It's very cool. And anybody that's ever lived in New York City One of the favorite things about this movie is gotta be Rosemary and Guy's apartment. How a barely employed actor can afford this gorgeous, gorgeous New York City apartment is beyond me. I love it. So, Chris, what are some of your favorite movie moments?
Prof, one of the things that was sort of near the onset, but it was a really disturbing scene, was where Rosemary's character sort of slips into this thing after eating drugged moose, and we were sort of going into the surreal part where she doesn't know what's real, what's not, and we're kind of immersed in this dream sequence. And I thought it was just really fascinating with how it was shot, just sort of snippets. And I love how people are tasked with, okay, depict a dream in a movie, and here we go. And it's just things are a little bit choppy, things are a little bit disjointed and disconnected. I liked how this was done. I think a lot was asked of Farrow as well as the rest of the cast. Some non sequitur lines that just don't make any sense, and some are kind of loosely connected, especially when she's on this boat and all of a sudden the dinner party, she's nude, she doesn't have any clothes, so she's feeling exposed and in front of all these other people pointing to certain directions. I just am trying to interpret this as I am watching it, and I just found the whole sequence fascinating, and I just wouldn't mind seeing that scene again to see if I could pick up some invisible clues with respect to that. Prof, I'm a fan of William Castle, and it was so nice where he does this little Hitchcock moment where he's standing near the phone booth, and I thought that was really classic because we only see the back of his head, and we wonder, is this some type of cultist? Is this somebody keeping an eye on Rosemary? No, it's just William Castle being William Castle, and I thought that was marvelous. Prof, as I previously stated, as we're seeing the opening of the movie and we're seeing the credits roll, and I'm just seeing a long list of people that I thought were marvelous, talented actors, starting with Morris Evans, who I first encountered as the puzzler on the Batman TV series, but had a long list of credits. He played Samantha's dad on the Bewitched TV series, and this was right around the time, though, too, that Planet of the Apes came out. So I'm wondering, boy, this guy was really busy, and just to get all this work in at the time, props to Morris Evans, or as they say in the U.S., Maurice, but I think abroad in Australia, it's pronounced Morris, so I'm going to leave it there. Prof, on another show, we do a That Guy segment. One of the guys we covered not too long ago was a guy by the name of Phil Leeds, and it was so nice to see him here because I had totally forgotten he was in this one as Dr. Shand. Really, really cool to see him here. Prof, there was an actress also in this movie by the name of Wendy Wagner, and if you're a fan of the short-lived Green Hornet TV series with Bruce Lee as Kato, Wendy Wagner played Lenore Casey Case, who was the secretary to Britt Reed. And it was nice to see Wendy Wagner here getting some lines and some work, and she was recognizable to me. She has very distinctive facial features, and it was so cool to see her here. And I was doing some research for the movie. I guess at one time, she once shared an apartment, and her roommate was Sharon Tate. So we have the connection with Roman Polanski. And I could see this, two struggling actresses out in L.A. sharing an apartment, trying to get some work. And it was nice to see Wendy Wagner here. And I can't think it was any non-coincidental that Sharon must have had a hand in getting Wendy Wagner some work here. And I thought with what little she had to do as the supportive friend to Rosemary, she was really, really good. Sharon Tate. Now, I don't know if I necessarily saw her. I was trying to keep my eyes peeled. I have a pretty good idea of what Sharon Tate looks like and what she would have looked like in this. And I just don't know if I saw her in any of these scenes with respect to it. I had my eyes peeled, but I just don't know if I saw her. I want to mention another actress, Hope Summers. If you're a fan of the Andrew Griffith Show, she played Clara, sometimes a busybody neighbor, sometimes a real supportive friend of Aunt Bee, but just so weird seeing her in this. There's Clara, from the Andy Griffith Show, the Mayberry resident, and she's saying these things about Satan. Oh my gosh. Right out of the gate, we got to see one of our favorite character actors, Elijah Cook, another past that guy. Really, really good to see him here as the person who's showing off the apartment. I like how he puts Cassavetes to task, saying, "Hey, help me move the secretary over here." And Cassavetes like, "Yeah, why not?" But this thing looks monstrous, but they were able to, between the two of them, move it with ease. But Elijah Cook is great in everything. I wish he had a little more to do here, but he was pitch perfect as the person showing off the thing. Ruth Gordon. Again, think she took home an Academy Award for this, for supporting actress. Outstanding. It's just the matter of factness of how she's stating all these lines, being the insistent friend with respect to that. I didn't know it was Tony Curtis's voice until after the fact. And I thought when he had the conversation, he was so good. And just like when they're ending the phone call, he says, "Thanks for your concern." And he thank you, and hangs up. And I like the way it ended. It had a really New York kind of vibe to it as well. Prof, one of the things you mentioned was all the sirens in the background. For me, there were a lot of scenes that, at least to me, felt like I heard a plane overhead. And it was like, I don't know if it sort of sounded ominous, but I just kept thinking of so many planes in the apartment. I heard stuff I think in Grodin's office. I heard a plane overhead at one point. It's like, wow, there are a lot of planes overhead, and I just wondered what that was all about. You caught the sirens, and I think I made a note of the sirens, but I just figured, well, this is New York City. But for me, it was hearing so many planes overhead, and I don't know if that was a conscious choice or if they just happened to be overhead and they just left it in. But man, for me, it was a little more than usual, if you will, with respect to that. So, Prof, here's where we pick it apart. Were there any other additional scenes? Prof, I like that you mentioned you caught the June 1966 for the 666 thing. I like that you caught the Time magazine. And I like that, having been in New York yourself, adding all the contemporary flavor and noting, like, yeah, you've seen the Fantastics as well, and this being the long-running show. As we're organically talking about this, were there any other little details that you caught or we want to circle back to?
Well, this is a good reason not to live on the Upper West Side. If we got buildings like this over there. I was on the Upper East Side, so completely different. I thought it was kind of New York is definitely a big part of this movie. She's out on the street a lot. These are definitely New York feeling apartments, to me anyway. And I like that, of course, being from New York myself and not living there now. It's always feels better when you're, being reminded of home. But it was New York of 1960. Well, they probably filmed this in 67 or 68, I guess. So it was definitely a different era of the city. And I really like that. I remember, I remember the city then. I remember, buses looking different and cabs looking different and all of that stuff. So it was a real kind of a touchstone for me to be able to go back and remember the city that I knew when I was little, very little at the time. I like the Scrabble scene. I like when she's trying to, use the Scrabble tiles to do the anagrams. That one is very, very strong for me. And just those scenes with Cassavetes when he's just like freaking out. I found, I've seen this movie before. I know the background, and I was watching it again for the show. And I really found myself watching Cassavetes as Roman kind of takes him through step by step. He's convinced of, that he's going to give Rosemary's baby to the devil. And as he's trying to keep a handle on things, he's kind of supposedly watching Rosemary for, like, hutch, oh, she's got a friend coming over that might mess up this deal. Let's kill him. So he runs off and he, tells Roman, and they come back and they, take the glove and blind him. All of these steps as Cassavetes is trying to stay ahead of Rosemary, I found very interesting in this rewatch. How about you, Chris? What are some of the things you remember?
Well, Prof, you bring up some good points too with New York of a certain time and a certain place. And I just happened to watch The French Connection this past week, and just to see some of the scenes on the subway and just looking at the vibe and looking at the vending machines. Yep. and seeing like a little snack bar, if you will, and just seeing like these orange drink and purple drinks and grape drinks going on through just seeing I can't think this is still in existence of these types of places there now. I think after everything is automated and what have you, movies like Taking a Pelham 123, just the gritty vibes of these things. I just wondered how close in proximity things were to certain places. There's a scene where she's across the street from Radio City Music Hall, and you see the neon sign flashing. And I'm just wondering, was this within walking distance with respect to it.
You mean in respect to their apartment?
Yes.
So that's in Midtown. So I mean, you could walk to it, but most people probably would take a cab.
Gotcha. Thank you.
It
I
was
appreciate you
across from the
clarifying.
Time Life building, though, at the time.
Ah, okay.
So that's what they mentioned. We're going to meet at the Time Life building. I think that's what the shot was. And then you saw Radio City in the background. So that was plausible.
Yes. Yes. I don't know if getting a place to park across from Dr. Hill's office when they see it was readily available, but this is a movie, so there we go. New York does steal a lot of scenes in respect to this. I thought Ruth Gordon was outstanding. She's, I don't want to say overbearing, but she's polite to a fault, if you will. And I think it's kind of like a real line that she has to walk. And she never really kind of breaks character. And I think there's this one side where I really like the beat where it's a very uncomfortable scene where Rosemary's being impregnated by the devil, if you will. But there's a little bit there where the camera pans from left to right. And Ruth Gordon, as only Ruth Gordon can say, something with respect to, the moose did its work. Is she awake? No, but she can't feel a thing because of the moose. Just in the Ruth Gordon voice. And it's just like, I didn't want to crack up because it's a really serious and a very, very intense and very disturbing, violent scene. But Ruth Gordon almost staying in character to a fault almost made me lose it a little bit with respect to that. And I just, it was one of those little taken aback moments. I liked the scene. There were little nuances in this. Cassavetes is good as the struggling actor. Prof, as you mentioned, how could they possibly afford where they are living? But I think some of these little hallways and little nooks were really, really cool. When the Cassavetes invite them over for dinner, their place has this homey feel to it with all these bookcases in the background of their dinner table and the candlelight. It was very, very nice. I like the scenes where the couple, they're so hopelessly in love and you're rooting for them. I sort of got a Neil Simon Barefoot in the Park vibe with these two a little bit, with how they were playing off each other romantically. I like the scenes with Wendy Wagner and Rosemary's friends, and when Cassavetes is coming in and he just wants to do something, no, they shoo him out. It's kind of a throwaway scene, but this woman is craving for some emotional, feminine support in this. Somebody who is her champion, somebody who can be her voice, somebody who can be her advocate. And it ain't him, and it's not Cassavetes. I mean, she and it's the women standing up for her. And I really thought we got that moment in this bit of this. Prof, I'm still struggling with the character who was Hutch's friend, and I just don't know. Now, granted, she did proffer something that says, "Here, take this book," and these were his last words. But what is Hutch into? I mean, who is this woman? and did she have? What were her machinations and motivations for her? I mean, she pops up. They have the meeting. Now, it's not planned, but she does show up at the cemetery. But this was totally, we get from Rosemary thinking, okay, I hope to see her there, but I don't know. We don't have any prearranged meeting. But there they are. Prof, if I was to speculate and kind of guess on this, do you think Hutch met a sinister end, or was it just natural with the way his character met his demise?
Well, I think they took his glove from his coat and put a spell on him, and he went into a coma. So that's what the Cassavetes did. I think this other woman. He was if I recall right, he was like a boys' adventure author. He was an author that wrote boys' adventure stories, and I believe they mentioned he had children. So, if I met somebody like that today in New York City, I would kind of assume they were gay. But this is 1965, 66 in this movie. You could have had a gay man who got married, back in the day. That happened quite a lot, to a woman and had children. But so my kind of vibe was, in my head canon, he was a gay man that got married and had kids and got divorced, when the kids were older, and maybe he has a friend. That's kind of the a female friend that, just like Rosemary, that they don't know each other, but is just a good friend. That's what I thought. I think at first when they talked to her, they made her sound, she had a little accent, so they made her sound a little menacing, like, oh, who's this? Did she do something to Hutch? But I think when we met her, she's just innocent bystander who's a friend to Hutch. That's what my vibe was.
Mm-hmm. The only other thing, I think thank you for acquiescing me. Prof, one of the other things too I think my heart really broke when Rosemary goes to Hill's office and she finally finds a guy she can confide in and trust. Hill says, make yourself comfortable. He turns on the air conditioner. He leaves. Then the next thing you know, she wakes up. You could just see the calm wash over Mia Farrow's character in this moment. And she just does a whole 180. Then all of a sudden she feels at ease. She feels like she's going to get some serious help and a person who cares for her. She takes a cat nap. The lights come on. It's instantly very bright. And who should walk in the door? But it's Ralph Bellamy and Cassavetes. No. It's just like the last two people she wants to see. And she doesn't resist, but she doesn't plead. She seems resigned to her fate. But I just think she is just so drained and worn out at this point. She has no fight left in her to kind of resist or try to escape. Except though she does recover and tries to seclude herself in the apartment building, and I give her props for that. But that was just a gut wrench moment, in my opinion. That's another thing I had in my notes that I forgot to include and mention there. But yeah, what a moment that happened.
That was a great moment. Yeah, and you can't trust Charles Grodin.
No, you cannot trust.
Not with a little mustache, with that little mustache he had.
Yes, no. Little mustache.
That was the last time we saw him with a mustache like that, I think.
Yeah. And he wanted to take a nap before he went to the office.
Yeah. Okay, so do you have anything else you want to say about Rosemary's Baby?
Prof, I just don't know where I'd rank it. I mean, this is a solid grade A movie. I think I'd give it possibly an 8.5 or a 9 out of 10. Is it a master? I know it's hard to call a movie a masterpiece, but this is a great horror movie. Yeah. I think the performances from top to bottom were good. It's a little on the long side, but I think it needs it to ramp up that slow burn and the paranoia from scene to scene and scene, where things just sort of escalate and topple on top of each other. And then we get the payoff moment at the end where she realizes, yes, indeed, her suspicions were indeed founded. And it's a great movie. And I just don't know if it's in public conversation, if it's necessarily lost to people behind us, if they've seen this movie. I think this is a movie that if you ask anybody older than us, if they've seen this movie, they would say, oh, absolutely. But if you ask maybe anybody younger than us, have they seen Rosemary's Baby? I don't think maybe the answer is yes. And if so, I'd have to say, hey, this is a movie you should probably watch at some point, and I think you'd like it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those, like in the late 60s, 70s, where they had kind of higher budget horror movies, like The Exorcist, The Omen, that kind of movie. And I think this is one of those kinds of movies, a little higher budget than something you'd see Boris Karloff in the day, but and with a professional sheen on it. So it's unusual for the movies that we typically watch, but I think this is really well put together. The story is very tight, and it's executed in a brilliant way, very efficient. And for a complicated story, easier in a novel to convey than in a movie, I think that this story was conveyed completely effectively.
I totally agree.
All right. So thank you for checking out Frenzy Frights. Check out our other shows, the Professor Frenzy Show, where we cover indie comics, That Guy in That Show, where we look at great character actors, and our Twilight Zone episode review, where we review, wait for it, Twilight Zone episodes. Thank you for watching and listening.
It's Frenzy.